You good to go?
Let's go. So, Leon Mascarenhas,
Hey,
welcome to the podcast.
thank you.
How are you doing?
Awesome. Lovely day today.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to talk about today.
I'm Leon Mascarenhas, and there's another surname to me,
Mhm.
Prabhu.
Okay.
So I've got all the possible names to survive in the subcontinent. It depends on who's asking.
Of course.
So I'm either Leon, I'm either Mascarenhas, or I'm Prabhu. I can be any one of the three. So that doesn't mean I've got a split personality, but that allows me to associate myself with different kind of situations and
course.
people around town.
Mhm.
I'm in the auto trade.
Mhm.
I sell cars for a living
Right.
from a dealership over here. I've been doing that right from the day I have passed out schooling.
Mhm.
So from then till now, I've always been in the auto trade
Right.
with different brands, with different products, not necessarily cars at some period of time, but always something to do with the auto trade. That's what I've been doing.
Nice. So, how did you get into the topic that we are going to talk about today? Off-roading.
Off-roading, that's sport.
Mm-hmm.
Off-roading has, I was with a brand in India,
Mhm.
Mahindra and Mahindra,
Mm-hmm.
and the dealership which I used to work with was handling the mountain ranges, like so Western Ghats, a place called Sakleshpur, the
Right.
place called Chikmagalur. So these are the regions which are the part of the Western Ghat. And over there, they used to have these, they used to sponsor these events.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got into the off-roading bug.
Right.
That's when Mahindra is also developing cars which were, Mahindra is known for being the foremost off-roader in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And the cars which they were developing at that period were luxury cars for that
Right.
region. And that's what allowed me to get into the off-roading scenario.
Right.
And then over there it was more of mountain climbing, slush.
Mm-hmm.
That's during the rains. That was a fun part of it. River crossing.
Wow.
So these were the kind of things which, when once you got bitten by the bug, then there was no going back from
There's
there.
no looking back from there.
No.
I can relate.
So I feel one is driving is one thing which is more of a mind calmer, as I would say, and another thing is riding.
Right.
Because I'm also an avid rider.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be an avid rider, but once I come this side, I've not ridden that much.
Right.
But driving and riding, these are the two things which I'd love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my family comes first, so being with them, and then after
Of
that,
course.
if I want some alone time, then this is what I do.
So your primary reason for off-roading and riding is basically therapy.
Therapy, you can say therapy.
Yeah. And getting connected with nature.
Yes.
Right.
And also the ability for you to meet different people from different sources, different parts of society.
This has a common interest.
Yes, because there are certain sports which allow you to meet only certain kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
But off-roading is a kind of sport you'll meet somebody who is from industry which you wouldn't even dream of existed.
Mm-hmm.
Because this kind of enthusiasm is a culmination of all different sports. So people who thrill, they are there. The people who like nature, they are there. People who like to be with communities, they are there.
Mm-hmm.
People who like to just find themselves, they are also there because you're pushing yourself to your limit.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways for you to do that. You're doing it safely. So
Right.
that's what's also there. So these are the things which are
Mm-hmm.
which attract people towards this kind
Right.
of these kind of events.
To someone who's very new to this, see, the general mindset when anyone's buying a car is like, take very good care of it.
Yeah.
Don't let it touch dirt.
True.
Maintain it very well. Of
Yes.
course, that's true for everyone.
Yeah.
But if I was talking to myself from 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and if I look at what I'm doing to my off-roader now, I'd be like, do you hate money? What's wrong with you? So if you could talk more to that, like
Yeah.
what's the entire philosophy behind off-roading in terms of vehicles and how they are specialized for the things that they do?
Yeah. So first of all, let's understand what's off-roading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So off-roading means just getting off the beaten path.
Mm-hmm.
So it does not mean that you have to have a certain kind of a product which is going to do everything. So you can either be in this region, you can either go on the sand.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain other regions you can go on mountains.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain other regions where rocks is a very common area.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Americas have got a lot of these in the deserts. They have the deserts, and they've got these canyon, the Grand Canyon, which they do a lot of climbing up there. The Australian region again is a completely different terrain which people drive in. The Scandinavian region again is another region
really?
because it's ice. So you've got a lot of different things. In fact, that's another nice thing which I would like to get into. I've not yet got there. And then you've got the South American region, which is similar to like what we have seen back home, the mountains, the slush, and the forest.
Right.
So these are the things. These are the different terrains which you can off-road. Now, what's an off-roader? Now, typically an SUV is an off-roader.
Right.
Okay. And you have got two types of SUVs. You've got the sport utility vehicles, which are all-wheel drives. That means all four wheels get power. And then you've got the 4x4. So everybody thinks a 4x4 and an all-wheel drive are the same thing. No, they're not. An all-wheel drive, you cannot control the amount of power which goes into the front wheels or the back wheels. It depends on which brand it is. So some are front wheel biased, some are rear wheel biased. Meaning that some brands have got more power going to the front wheel than to the rear wheel. It can be economy, it can be any such kind of thing, or the brand philosophy itself. And then you've got a 4x4, where you can, either it is all-time four-wheel drive, or it can be a two-wheel drive at the majority of the time, and then you've got a transfer case which you can push it into a four-wheel drive. So you've got a different lever or a button depending on different products which you're going to have. So these are the types of products which are there in the market.
Right.
So as you were saying, so like if you want to begin, so what are you going to look at? For starters, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into an extreme level of sport eventually, or do you just want to be with the family and enjoy nature? An all-wheel drive will do this job to a certain extent, but the point of an all-wheel drive is once you get stuck, you will not be able to bring yourself out so easily because there's not going to be much traction. Meaning that your tires are just going to spin where they are in any of the terrain which you're going to be at, whether it's sand, whether it's mud, whether it's even rock.
So the system isn't capable of making intelligent choices in difficult terrain.
No,
basically.
it's not. The system isn't. It is the driver who needs to induce the system to do that. So if it's an all-wheel drive system, there isn't anything beyond that. An all-wheel drive system is basically a functionality for a product to be safe on tarmac.
Right.
So if you have power going to all four wheels and you're taking a ramp exit or you're taking a roundabout at a higher speed, you do have power going to all four wheels, which will help you in, let's say, when you're taking a turn, to give you more traction or more grip onto the surface which you're on. So let's say a roundabout and there was water leaking on the sides. If you were a front wheel drive, something called as hydroplaning, when water comes on the road and you're a slightly higher speed, you will tend to skid. So you have either understeer or oversteer, depending on which car you're driving. And an all-wheel drive system, in case there's a skidding taking place, it automatically applies brakes to the diagonal wheel.
Okay.
So that is why you tend not to skid so much. You will skid, but not to tend to skid so much as compared to either a front wheel drive or a rear wheel drive. So these are the differences.
Right. So comparatively, compared to a two-wheel drive, it's a safer and better option on road.
On road, it's a better, safer and option on tarmac. It's a much better and safer option.
However, if you take it off-road, even with the best driver, it has a certain limitation it can't go beyond.
Correct.
So this is not something we would recommend to someone who's actually planning to go into difficult terrain.
Correct. So if there's a person who wants to challenge themselves on terrains, then they would look at a four-wheel drive. So a four-wheel driver would be a car which is either an all-time four-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive which has got either a rear wheel, predominantly the rear wheel drives, and then they got a transfer case which makes them four-wheel drive. The reason they do it is for fuel economy. Because when you're on the road, you do not want that. But its job is off-road, not on the road.
Right. So could you talk about your journey where it began with your first off-roader and how it progressed?
Sure. So my first off-roader was a Mahindra. It was an MM540. So that was one of the things. The legend. It was what they called as an international. The reason they used to call an international is because the engine was from a brand called Cummins.
Okay.
and people wouldn't be able to say Cummins, so they would say International because it's an imported engine.
Right.
So that was the first car which I would drive on, and it was not mine.
Okay.
Coming to the point of where did you spend money?
Okay.
So it was not mine. It was somebody else's car. And once I got into that particular bug, because luckily for the industry which I was in, I actually didn't need to have a car over there. I would always get a car. And this enabled me to try different kind of cars out there. And so I was always in Mahindras. I did not go into any other cars in this thing. But there are good products in India. So if somebody from here would like to look at those kind of terrains, like an Indian terrain, you've got either Mahindra and Mahindra, you've got Tatas also, who have got some decent products there, and you've got the Force Motors, who've got some decent cars out there.
Especially the Gurkha and
they have got
different variants.
three variants they've got.
Isuzu's getting into the market as well.
Isuzu was there as well. But you have Isuzu, you got Ford. I think so Ford's now left India, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So you've got that. Then you do have the Suzuki brands, where the Gypsy,
yeah. They're thinking about the Jimny, I think, for India.
It's called the Jimny over here. But then again, there's slightly difference in chassis. Yeah. But I think it's a similar platform.
If I'm not mistaken, they are planning about releasing the 5-door version of the Jimny in India.
I hear so. Yeah. But then even today, you can still order a Gypsy.
Really?
It's on a custom order. You can still order a Gypsy is what I just checked up.
I was considering an off-roader for India because I have a really tiny car back home because as an expat, I visit maybe a month in a year maximum. And I don't have never had that kind of a need before I got into off-roading. I have a Maruti Alto, and that gets around quite.
You need that kind of a car to move around in especially smaller towns.
Yeah.
Because of traffic congestion and parking.
Yeah.
And the ability for it to squeeze like a motorcycle.
Yeah, of course. It's amazing on several levels. It gets you almost everywhere where you want to go. It's surprisingly light, and unless you challenge it, really challenge it with difficult terrain, it basically goes almost everywhere where I need to go. But the challenge with that is since it's a smaller platform, the moment you hit the highways in India, if you're traveling at higher speeds and there's a pothole, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's true.
So more than off-roading, I think I'm considering an off-roader for the roads in India.
That does make sense.
So this is where I wanted to ask you. So I'm looking for off-roader that I can use part-time, as in part of the year in Mangalore. And I'm looking for something that is sturdy, something that I can really push to the limits. But I'm not looking to spend, say, 20-30 lakhs on a vehicle. So what would be my options from you could say, even from the vintage vehicles?
So the thing is that, do you want it to be a family-oriented car, or do you want it for yourself?
I want it for myself because I already have a family car. I want something that is purely for pushing it off-road.
Something for yourself, and let's start from the older ones. You still do have the MM540s, which is
that's
something
the one I had my eye on.
Yeah, that's something which you should always, at least once in a lifetime, own one of those. And also you can look at modifying them because they are one of the most basic technology which they have. It's a ladder chassis, leaf spring, and then the engine on top of it, and then your body.
That's it.
So that gives you the ability to modify each and everything. You can get out from the leaf spring, get into a double wishbone. You can, of course, the rear still, because it's a ladder, so the rear still will need a leaf spring because of that particular constraint which they face over there. Unless, it's not that it is a constraint. You can still go into coil and strut, but it is always suggestible for those road conditions, for those kind of a load conditions. Why you use a leaf spring? Because you want to have higher load
capacity.
So that's what you would keep that there for. But I'm talking not spending too much as well. And being economical. And you can literally convert that vehicle to look like a modern day Jeep.
And how about reliability?
It depends on how well you have modified the car.
And it being a diesel vehicle, can you keep it as a part-timer that runs only part of the year?
Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. What do I need to do to keep it
General
in good
maintenance
condition?
is that diesels, diesels need heat to run. So you need to ensure that the vehicles are always in a running condition.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're not there, somebody needs to start it up, move it forward, helps you not getting flat spots,
Mm-hmm.
keeps your vehicle running, or constant oil changes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not running, that means, but still every 6 months you still need to change your oil.
Right.
So these things are something which you need to keep into mind. So even if you're considering that you're going to be there only 1 month in a year, and the rest of the time the vehicles may lie idle,
Mm-hmm.
it needs to move around. It just
Mm-hmm.
cannot sit there.
Right. So it has to be driven.
Yes, and at a place like Mangalore, rodents also are going to be a big challenge over there. So the other ones are going to eat up wires and everything.
So does it have to be driven like every single day, or
No? If, let's say once a week,
Mm-hmm.
it just goes out for a few kilometers and comes back, should be fine.
So
Yeah, the main point is that the engine runs,
right.
so that it keeps its thing moving.
The MM540 strikes to me as a vehicle that you don't need to be too worried about braking.
To brake it is a challenge because, as I told you, it's just a ladder chassis, a set of suspensions, and the engine and a body on top of it.
Not many things in there.
Not many things to brake. So that's the advantage of earlier vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
The number of moving parts were much less,
Mm-hmm.
and the technology on them was much less compared to the ones today.
Almost no electronics.
Almost no electronics. The ones which you would get today, I have still seen the ones today which are the earlier ones have not yet been modified to disc brakes. They're still running on drum brakes, both front and rear. The four-wheel drives, they use a concept called Lambda, which is a small device which is fitted onto the front axle, and you actually need to take a plier and switch it on and switch it off. I mean, turn it on, twist it on and twist it off. So
I'm happy to live with that.
so
That's all right.
But these are some of the challenges which you do that. And applying brakes, I still recollect one day when I was going up the Ghat section, and come up, I had absolutely, because of climbing. Going towards coming down, I realized that the brakes are not sufficient. And not only myself, the person sitting next to me was also stomping on top of the brake first to apply the brake. So that was our condition till we got the car to stop.
Right.
But fortunately, we managed to bring it to a halt and then towed it after that because it was too dangerous to drive.
So engine braking was the way you were going.
That's the way we ended up stopping it and towing it. But let's say you go in for one of these earlier cars, converting them into a disc brake would be
a good investment. Right. And the parts are readily available as well.
I'm sure.
Right.
I do not have much this thing on that, but I'm sure they're going to be readily available.
I had quite a, surprise with MN540 a couple of years ago, I think. I was in India and a friend was showing me a recently refurbished MM540 he had. So I don't think he had put in a lot of money into it. It was done up well. It was refurbished to a pristine condition. The car's suspension had been upgraded. It had a snorkel. It had all the off-road bells and whistles. And we took a little drive. And this was my first time in a MM540. And he was telling me, look, there's a play in the steering. You have to basically live with this. This is not a modern car. It had a sticker saying there's no airbags. We die like men. And what surprised me, number one, out here at work, I work with Land Cruisers and Jeep Wrangler Rubicons all the time. That car was smoother than the Jeep I drive here. And that car is old as me. It's a 1986 model. And I was like, not bad. If I don't need to break my present car, my bank or my present car doing things that I do.
Exactly.
I could get one of these really cheap.
Yeah.
And
you won't have and you don't feel that fear factor of let's say I modifying it and something is going to go wrong. No?
Yeah. That's an advantage because you can't go wrong with many things on an MM540 because it's so low tech and in a good way, very low tech.
Yeah.
You have very less risk of breaking something and having a huge bill at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And since I didn't know much at the time about Mahindra Jeeps and even now
it's the Mahindra and the Jeep.
Mahindra and the Jeep. Sorry.
Okay.
about the MM540s and the other older models. My concern was since I'm not in the country most of the year, is it something that I should be going for? But after speaking to you, maybe
it will be, you'll enjoy it.
Because it's good to have one off-roader that you can not bother about breaking anything on the car and go wherever you want.
True. So that's one thing. And then if you're an enthusiast and you like to have the open air, you can even look at keeping the chassis of an MM540 and going in for a Willys kind of a body.
Right. So that's completely open with the collapsible.
Yeah, even if a 540 can collapse and you can get it open, but then what happens with the 540? Your bonnets are higher. With the Willys chassis, with the Willys body, you have a lower bonnet. So you can look into that sort of a concept as well.
Right, it gives you much more visibility and
gives you a better look. Right. Nothing to do with it just looks good, and it's an open thing, so you're much more.
I'm talking visibility because I drive an FJ.
Yeah,
visibility is not my friend.
Yeah, that's I know.
Since you started with the FJ as well, yeah.
And the 3 wipers in the front also a bit confusing sometimes.
And the upright windshield.
Yes.
Yeah, that can be some trouble.
Yes.
I'd be really worried about driving the FJ, especially about the windshield in India.
Yeah.
Because anything that flies into it will break it.
True. And also with limited visibility, the leap of faith is going to be a bit more challenging for you.
Yeah. So, talk to me about the different vehicles that you owned and how you like them, basically.
Okay. So I started off in this region. I started off with the FJ Cruiser. This was in 2013 is when I went in for the FJ Cruiser first. And then subsequently from there, I've upgraded myself to Jeep. Now, a person who likes an FJ will say...
I'm going to try not to take offense to that.
will never say that it's an upgrade. But the reason I'm saying that is because the stuff which you could do in a Jeep, I couldn't do that in FJ, and vice versa. But the comfort level in a FJ was much, there's no comparison between that and a Jeep. A Jeep, again, like a 540, it's just a box.
Road banners of a brick.
Yeah, but the ability, the capability of a short wheelbase like a Jeep, because I had the Wrangler Sport, so that was a 2-door, something like this one over here. And now an FJ guy seeing this will say, okay, fine, he just went up the mountain and came back because it's open and he needs to cool down. But that's the fun part of it. And the second part of it is every week you have to go and get them. You needed some TLC every week. At least mine needed a TLC every week, and
which you don't need to do with an FJ.
Which you don't need to do with an FJ, and that gave me the ability to fix more things into the car. And now people will say, "Why you want to fix more things?" That's the fun part of it.
So each car comes with its own character.
That comes with its own character.
You learn to love.
Exactly. You cannot put a finger to it as to this car is good or that car is good. They are all good in their own ways. The question is, what of those things which are good is suitable for you?
Right. What is your application for the vehicle?
Correct. Even let's say, for example, your application for the vehicle is the same. Let's say your end goal was the same, but you wanted comfort doing that. Or there would be another person, I wanted to do many more things than comfort when I'm doing those things. So that's what makes the difference over here. That's why it's either an FJ or Jeep. And why I stuck with the Jeep a longer time than the FJ is one. Like you were talking about the visibility, that was one part of it. Second part of it was on the sand for me to do more things
with the Jeep, right,
compared to an FJ. Not that the FJ was one amazing product, but I felt for me as a driver, I was doing more things with the Jeep than the FJ. Probably the fear factor of not being able to see outside, and bigger thing with the Jeep was I could open the entire car on the top, including the glasses and the doors and everything. So the modification capability on the Jeep was much, much higher than that of an FJ. So probably that's what attracted me to the Jeep than the FJ. But now I'm back into the similar Toyota family. After getting married, of course, the bug did not go away. So I got myself a Prado. Helps the family as well, and helps me to keep doing what I like to do.
That's a very good, you could say, compromise.
Yeah.
That's the best word I feel.
Yeah.
It's a very good off-roader,
Yes.
very, very capable,
True.
but also a family vehicle.
It is a family vehicle.
You
Yeah.
can't say that so much about the FJ.
No, you
Yeah.
cannot.
There are some
with,
disadvantages.
Yeah, especially with the suicide doors, and
Yeah.
you have a toddler with you, you cannot manage that.
Yeah, that's a task by itself. Forget having a toddler with you. Getting out of the car when you're parked next to two other cars,
Yes.
that itself is a challenge.
Yes.
Because it'll increase your problem solving abilities.
True.
Getting out of the car. Because if anyone, for someone who's not seen how the FJ doors open, when you're parked right next to a car, it's near impossible to get out without a lot of awkward situations.
Yes.
But the reason I came to the FJ, the first time I drove an FJ was like, okay, this suits me perfectly and this is what I want. I think that was in 2016 or 17. So back then, my first off-roader was a Volkswagen Touareg. And that is completely opposite to the FJ in many different things.
Yes.
It was a nice car. It was powerful. It was a four-wheel drive, had locking differentials, low ratio transfer case and everything. But it did not like the sand. I would take it everywhere, and I've taken it to most of the Jeep trails in Sharjah. It got on pretty well. But at some point, it would have some problem with the electronics were hassle to deal with. And as they say, there was a nanny on board always, because the traction control, even if you switch it off, would kick in and mess things up for you. And I don't know exactly your style of driving, but for me, I came to off-roading because I started off because of the place where I work and the work I do over there in the desert. And the second part was my love for nature. I am a bird photographer, so I have to go out into the desert looking for different species. So that's how I came to arrived at off-roading and then got into it.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was actually a year into driving the Touareg in the desert. A friend of mine calls me and says, why don't you take a few pictures of me on a horse? He's a horse trainer. So I was like, okay, let's go. And he had an FJ at the time. So he says, drive my car. You don't need to deflate yours. You can just come back and take off. I said, okay. His car was already deflated. I started driving. First thing I noticed was how light the vehicle was. And at this time, I have been working with Land Cruisers and Jeeps for a couple of years. And I have driven them in the desert. And it was so much different compared to the other cars that it was very much to my liking.
I understand.
So first thing I noticed, I don't exactly remember how much he had deflated the car, because first thing I noticed, he was on a horse and he was like, let's go to X location, and I was following him. The car followed the horse wherever the horse went. And that was the most shocking thing for me, because it was doing it without any effort.
Yeah, and as history says, the horses show the way, and this did a good job for you.
And this, I think it's a combination of considerably lightweight body with a powerful engine of a 4-liter engine, which basically made getting across the dunes quite effortless.
Sure.
And even though I like the Jeep, certain things that the Jeep can do, the FJ would struggle at. I've done certain things in the Jeep that I don't do on my FJ. Personal preference, I don't like revving my car too much. So I am one of those who gets from A to B in a very, very calm and steady, just as much throttle as needed sort of approach. So the FJ suited my needs perfectly. So that was a moment I was like, okay, this is the car for me.
That's great.
That's it. And then about a couple of years ago, I bought an FJ, and I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome.
Few concerns here and there, but first of all, I bought one from the used market. So it is yellow.
But that's what you need to have, these colors in one of those kind of a product.
I spent 10 minutes explaining to my wife before I said it's yellow. Spent 10 minutes saying, look, it's in very good condition, low mileage, this, that. She's like, get to the butt, what is it? So it's yellow. Don't bring it home. But now, I like to experience different vehicles, so I keep changing vehicles every few years.
Okay.
So now, when I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, maybe we should get something with 5 doors. I was looking at a Nissan Patrol. Maybe I'll get one of those. Now my wife is like,
no,
keep it. And I asked her as well, like, what about we repaint the car? Maybe some other color.
No.
Is it going to get less uglier? No.
I like the way you say it's going to be less uglier.
No, I brace it completely. It's been called a washing machine.
Yeah.
That's the running joke out here.
Yeah.
They call FJs washing machines.
Yeah.
It's a Jeep thing.
So you know about the Jeep things, yeah?
Only difference is this one didn't wobble. So
but, yeah, you have solutions for that as well.
Right. So at one point, I was like, okay, it's quirky. It's going to look like a old school lunchbox anyway.
Yeah.
That's how it's shaped.
Yeah.
I learned to live with the color.
That's good. So that brings you back to the point like you were talking about. How do you get into off-roading?
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, I've gone through different types of products. You do have different types of products. So a person who would like to start, so they can look at these kind of things. So like you can either look at a used car and you go in for a low-level expense. Jeep is one thing. Your FJ is also, but then they're slightly on the higher side.
Mm-hmm.
You do have Nissan products, but then the disadvantage with the Nissans or Jeeps is that they tend to heat up because they're not designed exactly for this particular
part of the world.
Thing. So they're designed for the part of the world probably, but not for these particular activities.
Right.
So the design is predominantly an on-road design.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're taking things off-road, you would tend to push it to its limits. So these cars are not.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd look at some kind of, so if you want something with a 4-door, you do have the Unlimited on the Jeep, or you do have many other Toyota products, even a Fortuner is good. And,
right.
So you've got quite a few products for the family, which you can start off and you can go.
Mm-hmm.
And during your discussion, you were talking about deflating.
Mm-hmm.
So why to deflate is what I wanted to talk about. So you do have many people who had bought a off-roader, go into the sand, and then get bogged down. So the reason for that is because they don't have sufficient traction.
Mm-hmm.
So traction is the amount of tire on the road. So the higher the amount of tire on the road gives you better grip. Now on the road, you have got a particular PSI, which you will maintain for the optimum use. So that's for your fuel efficiency, which makes a defect. That's why it's always recommended to keep checking your tire pressure, because over here, even when you drive on the road, because of the ambient temperature, tire can inflate or deflate. So it's always recommended to keep checking your tire pressure at least once a week. But let's say on the sand in this region, when you're going off road, you will need to go lower, because when you go lower, your tires are going to go flatter and they're going to be more on the sand. So you're going to get more traction on the sand.
You get a bigger footprint.
You're going to get a bigger footprint. So that is why it will allow you to grip more. There's a disadvantage also to that. You have higher grip and you are increasing your power. You can also dig. Yeah. Second thing, your tires are designed to be within your wheels. Yeah. And when you deflate your tires, and you go on a lower PS, when you go at lower level so that you get higher grip, you're restricting your movements, meaning that when you're turning, your tire is also going to come out of its ball. It's known as a pop-out. So we'll talk about that when we reach there. So for starters, what are the things which you need when you're going to go into the desert? We'll talk about only the sand. Even if it is on a low key, the first thing which you need is a shovel. You need a tow rope. Now, when a tow rope is not a plain rope, it needs to be of like a bungee cord. It needs to have a tension, so that when you pull it, the kinetic energy when it's released is going to pull you outside your stuck zone. So you need to have something like that. And then you will need to have a jack. You'll need to have a wood piece because it's sand, and if you had a flat tire or a pop-out tire, you will need to lift your car. So that's why you would need to have a wood. Otherwise, you can't place your sand. Or you can even have you in the market today. You get you get pedestals which you can keep on the ground with which you can do that. You also have differential jacks, but then they need to be carried along with the car. But that's a heavier proposition. You need a whole toolkit set. You'd also need oils because you do not know what you can hit and what you can drain. So you should have a bit of engine oil. You should have a bit of brake oil and coolant. Now again, comes back to this guy with his open bonnet. My initial days of the Jeep before I could modify it with a higher grade of cooling fans, I used to carry coolant with me because it will use a lot of coolant. So basically all your fluids, the safety equipment, these need to be with you. And not to forget a safety kit, first aid kit. That's also something which can come in handy because a first aid kit will not only in case of a serious thing, even when you are changing your tire, you can cut your finger. If anything, you need a first aid kit for that. So that's also a part of your of your safety. So these things need to be with you in your car. And if you're going off the road, a flag is a must. The reason for the flag is that if you're going down a dune, the person who's on the top can see that you're there. Otherwise, nobody will know you're down. So that's the reason you need a flag.
Right.
It should be of a sizable height so that it is visible. Right. So that's the thing. Normally, you'd look at a flag and you think it bounces around. That's why it looks nice. The reason for a flag is somebody knows that you're there. So an identification. So these are the basic items which you would have in your car. Even if you're going for a low level off road, let's say let's say an introduction level or a newbie level. These are the things which you should have.
Right. And sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, and also you need to ensure that your car is in a completely off-roadable situation, that it's completely mechanically safe. It's been checked. You have tow hitches both in the front and on the rear, because tow hitches from the factory at some period of time may not be
up to the mark.
Up to the mark. So you may have to reinforce that. So these are some things of the basics which you need, which do not cost you much money at all. It's hardly anything on your pocket, but allows you to get there.
Right.
And once you're there, then you can move forward. So a pop-out is a situation where now we have deflated our tires. So now your walls are got less air in them.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the distance. That's the between your tire and the alloy. They have got less pressure against it. So when you are turning, you're putting more pressure onto the wall.
Right.
So which can enable your wheel to come out, the tire to come out of your wheel. So this situation is called a pop-out. So what you would do is you would put in, once you're stuck over there, you dig the floor, dig the sand out. That's why the wood which we need, because you can't place your jack on plain sand. That's why you need either a piece of wood or you need those pedestals where you can keep your jack. And if your car is lifted, then you need even a bit more
bigger space,
a bit higher jack. And then once you lift your wheels up, you would of course remove your sand out, and then you'd fill in air. So air compressor is also something, if you're going into the desert, which is a handy tool. And an air compressor can come in handy for many other things. Like for example, I go cycling sometimes with the family, so the air compressor comes good and handy there. So that's when you can use your onboard air compressor to fill in air. You do have onboard, or you can carry a air compressor on your own. So this is what you need to have in your car.
So basically, from road pressure of 35 psi, you would say a safe off-road tire pressure would be something about 15 or 12?
It depends on what you're doing. Let's say you're just going on sand, 18 is good enough for you, because you have to remember, you're going lower than recommended pressure, almost by 50%. So that means your stability on a surface which is not what it's designed for is going to be less. So if you're going to around 18 on normal sand should be fine. But if you're going a
Into
bit
the dunes.
more, 15 is okay. But if you're going lower, you need to see that your tires are also equipped to take that pressure,
Right.
because your car's got a particular weight which it's at, and the wheels have got a particular weight which can take in that, and the design of your tire. So if it's a stock tire, then you do have a limit at which you can go down. So that is the reason you modify your tire. You put a bigger tire where you have a larger wall size, and that will help you to deflate more. So you can go as low as 12 or even 10. In my Jeep, I used to go as low as 8.
Same here.
Because that enables you to do much more
Yeah.
things.
You float
Yes, you do
when
float.
you're at 8.
Yes.
And
But at the same time, it is not safe for you to drive like the road.
Yes.
You cannot, once you get off the road, you should forget what you were doing on the road.
Exactly.
So
It
that
took
is
me a while,
yeah.
actually.
So that's the biggest thing. And movements have to be very subtle. You cannot have sudden movements like no swerving. You cannot swerve. You cannot go against gravity. So if the vehicle's pulling you down towards a particular thing, you follow the vehicle.
Yes.
Don't fight it. It's not designed to do that. And we'll talk about that when we start talking about the getting into the dunes.
Right. So you are part of off-road community that also guides and teaches new
Yes.
drivers.
Yes. So I'm a part of a community called the Adventure Tribe. It used to be called the Night Riders. The artists normally known as the Night Riders.
Right.
So we call ourselves the Adventure Tribe. I've joined them since 2015. 2015 I've joined them. Earlier I used to drive with some other enthusiasts, but then I joined them in 2015 and been with them since. They do help. So as a group, we help anybody who'd like to get into this kind of a sport. Of course, provided you do have the right vehicle to start with, which we just gave you a list of vehicles which you can look at. Basic criteria for vehicles, brands your choice. So the criteria, but I would always say a Jeep. Although I'm driving a Prado today, I know you will say an FJ. And then you would also look at your basic safety equipment. So that's what, once you have that, and then we will help you to get onto the sand, which is very simple.
Right. So shall we talk a little bit about basic safety when it comes to driving through the dunes, since that's a predominant landscape here?
Yes. So let's say once we have done all these things which we just discussed about, that's deflating to the right pressure. You got all your safety equipment with you, and then there's also another thing which we would use is a two-way communication device. The reason you do that is because on the sand you cannot communicate with each other. You cannot raise a voice and then communicate because it's not going to carry in the desert. So we would use some sort of a communication device to talk to each other. And that's also recommended to have along with the flag when you get into the dune. The flag is for visibility to know where you are. And the communication device is so that in case you are in a sticky situation, you can be told what to do. Now, let's say let's start getting into the desert. The first thing which you would want to do is forget an ego. Just because a guy in front of you did something, that doesn't mean you can do it.
Or you should.
Or you should do it. So if you go there, you attempt, it's not happened, come back, try it again. It's not that you cannot do it. But at that period of time, if it is not done, then don't get there. So once we got all our safety equipment in place and we are ready to go onto the sand, the first thing is leave your road sense on the road and bring in your sand sense.
I had a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah, that's the biggest difficulty, because let's take it 7 days a week, 6 days a week you're driving on the road, or even that 7 day you're driving on the road. It's only 2 hours in that particular drive, or 3 hours in that particular drive you're on the sand. So those first few seconds of you being in the sand are very challenging. You need to leave whatever you thought on the road, whatever safety you had on the road. And your safety on the desert has to be what you had on the road plus another 100% more. That's your observation, your reaction, and your ability to come through a situation. So that's fear, because when you go up a dune, you cannot see what's on the other side. So you need to trust the person in front of you when you're starting off, and then subsequently when you're driving, you'll know what to do. So we'll talk about the entry level. Let's say the first day, I just got all my safety equipment. I deflated. I got my briefing from the group members, and I'm going on the sand. So the first thing I do is just leave what I have driven on the road, all my senses. I just leave it there and bring onto the sand sense. When you're on the sand, the first thing you're going to experience is no control. So first, that's one thing you will have to grow. So you should not you don't need to have a fear factor there. Just allow it to go. Second, a dune can be approached in multiple ways. So always, let's take, for example, this is a dune. So a dune begins from one side and ends on another side. On top of the dune, you get a crust.
Right.
So this is a crest over here. So a dune can be from here, end here, and I can pick up here and end here, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple ways of approaching a dune. The first way is, so let's start driving. The basic way is to get up here. So get up here and then back down there. So this is a top-down approach. So what are you looking at? So your typical off-roader, this is called your ingress. So your distance between your bumper and your wheel is got your ingress, and behind over here, your bumper and your wheel is called your regress. So that's why you see a product like this, you're very close to your front bumper. So you would also want, let's say, for more safety, remove this front portion over here so that your wheel has got more reach. So that when you're hitting something, your wheel reaches first. So there's also another thing which you can look at underneath over here is your transfer case. So you look to have a skid plate. So why a skid plate? So that in case you are hitting some object at a higher speed, you're not going to damage anything underneath there. So that's where we are at. So when this happens over here, you see this? You're going to hit this portion first. So skid plate is going to take that impact, and then your wheel, and then you come up over here, and then over here you need to remember not to throttle up. Just let go, and then it comes down over here. Because what happens is when you go up here and you stop off, you're going to belly, and then you can't move. So then either you have to be towed backwards, that's where your tow rope comes in handy, or you have to be towed frontwards, either one of the two. So this is your first approach. So you'd come up dune. Again, speed is not the challenge over here. You're not going fast. This is not for you to race. That's why road sense remains on the road and your sand sense begins over here. And this is not for you. This is not against that the person ahead of you did it and you are not able to. No, it's not an ego challenge. It's something which you will learn eventually. But the main thing is never fight that urge to do that. So let's say you hit over here, you come up here, come 3/4 over here, and then allow yourself to come back down. No throttle back down. So this is your first approach. This is the basics of what you would learn to do on the dune. So what you're going to feel when you're on the sand for the first time? You're going to feel that softness. It's going to wobble a little bit. So you need to have that steering control. Left, right, very subtle movements so that you're keeping on going straight. Remember these words, left, right, because once you start driving, then left, right is you're going to hear that a lot. And then throttle control. You do not want to touch your brakes. You want to allow your engine to do its own braking, because once you're on a 4-wheel mode, your engine's going to have a more torquier feel to it. So that's another sensation which you need to get used to, because it's going to feel that you're being held back.
Right.
And you'll tend to throttle more. No. So what's actually happening is you're getting a low end torque in place at low gears, which is allowing you to move out of these situations.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where we would start off on the basics.
Right. There's one part here where I had quite some trouble with. It took me a while.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I'm one of those who goes from point A to B. I don't rev my car a lot.
Yes.
So that gave me a few challenges in the sense that there were some learning outcomes that I did not get from not
Yes.
going a little crazy with my car. So when it was on the side of a dune, when you're on a bigger dune, maybe say it's about 15 feet high, I always used to run into a little trouble when I'm on the side of the dune. For example, I'm going this way. If I'm going this way,
the side sloping.
Yeah, side sloping. And if I lose momentum, since I'm not revving too much, and I start sliding down, I would try to go back up.
Fighting gravity. That should never happen. Never fight gravity.
And I got stuck multiple times, and thankfully that's the worst that happened.
Yeah.
But you can topple your car over.
Yeah, in extreme situations. But the key over here is being safe.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said throttle control.
Right.
You want to see that you're at the right speed. You do not want to over rev it. At the same time, you do not want to do it less.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be just right there. And that's why I said just because a guy in the front did it, that doesn't mean you need to do it.
Our listeners can probably learn from my mistakes because I probably did everything wrong, everything possible.
That's what everybody has done.
Right.
Even me on my very first drive, the top down, that's the very first thing you'd like to top down. I thought that you need power to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually flew off my vehicle from the dune. But luckily it was a very small thing. It hardly 2 or 3 feet. But it is an impact because you're talking about a 2-ton vehicle going up around 3 to 5 feet. It is an impact.
Lot of force.
It takes a lot of toll on your body. It takes a toll on your vehicle. It does a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Leave alone larger jumps, which you can do at a later stage. But this is what you should do. Always take it easy. Nice and easy, as it said. We got a colleague, one community member, one of the marshals. He always says nice and easy. So always be nice and easy. That's what helps you to be calm.
Mm-hmm.
No frustration. Just relax. Just get it done.
Right. And practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And no matter what, no matter how experienced you are, the desert can throw up some surprises.
Anytime.
That is something to be
I've
expected.
driven with the best of the best and seen things which you cannot even dream that can happen. So that's why safety first.
Right.
Ego, not on the desert. And your desert sense, your sand sense is 100% more than what your road sense was. That is your looking forward, your vision, what you're going to do, and then your reaction time, and also your ability to get out of a situation. You should anticipate these things much more than what is on the road, because driving on the sand is completely different than what is driving on the road.
Right. So you have to unlearn and relearn a lot of things.
Yes.
Any message you would like to leave our viewers and listeners with before we conclude?
Off-roading is an enthusiastic sport. It's a bug which you can get into. You can be with the family and you can do it yourself as well. And it's something which you need to be with nature. And this helps you to do that.